Hey, this is Janet Feld, and I am the Chief Music Officer at Janet's Planet Music Lessons for Humanoids. And I'm really excited today have invited my friend Carrie Cooper to come join us today to talk about a whole bunch of her experiences as a performing songwriter over the last few years. And I know Carrie from the Kerrville Folk Festival, and she is an awesome songwriter. I could listen to her sing the phone book. She's got one of those voices, and
Cool.
really delighted to have you here today, Carrie. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. It's good to be with my friend Janet.
Yeah. And so, well, I think you probably know this already, but all the cool people hang out on Janet's Planet.
As they should.
Hello. Um, So let's talk about, let's just start with what's going on for you now, because you've launched into sort of a new phase of your career, sort of the post-COVID phase, and
Yes.
now the post-Hurricane Helene phase. Oy vey.
Crazy.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
um,
Well, I was
love to hear
definitely
about what you're up to.
sure. Well, I was definitely caught in the whole Hurricane Helene thing. I've been living in Asheville, North Carolina for the last, well, total for the last 10 years. I spent two of those during the pandemic in Nashville, but decided I really missed Asheville. So I went back and then was there until the hurricane hit. And I live in a tiny house on wheels that I built with the idea that it would make touring easier. But of course, that happened right as the pandemic was starting. And so touring wasn't even a thing. And so I'm just now starting to really dip my toes back into the water of touring and doing shows. But in addition to that, I'm also doing a lot of song coaching with people from all over the country.
Nice.
And in addition to that, I'm getting ready in January to launch the first true what iteration, I guess, of real people, real songs that basically anyone that's a songwriter can sign up for. It's a 12-week program, and you write a song a week for 12 weeks from a prompt that I give out. You post those songs on all social media outlets, or I do for the participants. And then, in addition to that, there are what every 2 I was going to say bi-weekly, but that's not right. Bi-monthly um, workshops that you participate in on Zoom with the other songwriters that are part of the session, and you get a coaching session with me as part of that, and learn all about how to increase your social media um, platform.
Mhm.
And it's just a lot of good things going on in that. Running a test group right now with some friends just to work out all the kinks, but I'm really excited to launch that officially in January.
Oh, that sounds really awesome. So it sounds like really like artist foundation building in terms of, the creative work as well as the business part of it as well.
Definitely, there's both aspects. I'm not the best on the business end of things, which is why I recruited some younger songwriters that I know that have incredible social media followings, and they're actually putting together a workshop that all of the participants of this test group are going to go through next week. And so I'm hoping to learn a good bit from them before the actual launch in January.
Yeah, nice. That's awesome. Because there's always new things to learn,
Definitely.
things, I mean, I think, back when you and I first met, you still had to go to the post office to mail a press kit to a venue, and
Yeah. All changed.
Thank God, thank God for the
Thank God I have
EPA.
kids that can keep me up at least a little bit on some of the social media stuff. I'm usually on the phone going, how do I do this? And one of my girls is usually there to bail me out. So,
Fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, no, let's hear it for remedial technology assistance from youngins, you know. Uh,
exactly.
absolutely, absolutely. So, although I do have a pocket protector in my aura, so there's a lot
I
of
know.
I feel very comfortable with. Um, but so speaking of your kids, that's one of the reasons I wanted to invite you to talk to us today is because you've had a really a long, really wonderful career as an artist, and you've done it, while raising kids by yourself and with a partner, and then by yourself again, and so I'd love to hear a little bit about, well, what inspired you to uh, begin to write songs and perform to begin with, and then once you were in that world, how did you make that work for yourself, given some
Okay.
pretty huge obstacles? I'd love to hear about that, and I'm sure this will be to a lot of people.
Well, the way that I got started in all of this is in the middle of a really bad marriage, and I was heavy in therapy. And my therapist one day just looked at me and said, Carrie, she said, I'm afraid if you don't find something outside this marriage that makes you happy and feel fulfilled, that I'm afraid you're going to die. And she said, I don't mean emotionally or spiritually or anything like that. She said, I'm afraid you're going to keel over and be dead. And I don't think it's going to take that long. And as a mother of a daughter at that point in time, I had one young daughter that was about 4 years old, and I lived for her. I scared me to death to hear that because I thought I can't not be here and take care of her. So I took it really seriously, and I have to say, for about a month, I walked around kind of like a zombie in a daze, just thinking, I honestly don't know what would make me happy. I was that out of touch with myself at that time. And a friend invited me to go to a house concert. And I didn't even know what house concerts were. I thought maybe it's some kind of weird cult or something. I really had no clue. And I ended up at this house out in Wiley, Texas. I think you're familiar with that house.
Oh, darn
Um,
nose.
that's where I was. And I walked in, didn't know anybody except for the friend that invited me. So I just walked in and sat my butt in a chair, and while other people were milling around and talking and thinking, what is this? And then the minute that the artist got up to sing and was telling stories about their life and singing these touching songs, I just thought, oh my gosh, this would make me happy. This is what I was probably born to do, and it just took me this long to figure it out.
Yeah.
And even though I'd never really written a song before, I had always written. I'd always sung in choirs and loved to sing, but I didn't play any instruments at that time. I played piano a little bit as a kid, but hadn't played in years. But I knew there was an old beat up guitar hiding in the back of a closet at my parents' house. So I went home from that house concert. I wrote 3 songs that weekend, all about leaving the marriage, and ran up to my folks about an hour north and picked up the guitar, taught myself 3 chords, and was kind of on my way. And then at that point, I'd never been to the Kerrville Folk Festival yet. And the same friend that took me to the house concert, we kind of decided we need to go to that festival. And so maybe 3 or 4 months after that, we ended up at the what was then called the Wine and Music Festival, which was a weekend that's held in the fall. And the air conditioning just kicked in here, so I hope that doesn't make a big loud noise.
No, that's
Anyway,
fine.
okay. But we ended up at the festival, and I remember hearing a man by the name of Tom Prasada Rao singing a song about called Sleeping Beauty. And I was, newly in this place of thinking I needed to leave this marriage. Actually, fast forward, I think I've gotten the time a little mixed up in this story because when I heard Tom, Hannah, my second daughter, had actually been born, and she was a surprise. Was coming right at the end of this marriage, and but I ended up leaving and had her with me at a different festival that I went back to, and heard Tom sing and thought, this is my anthem. And this is what's going to help me to have the courage to go through all of these hard changes that I'm getting ready to have to do. And so, about 6 weeks into my youngest daughter's life, I moved out of that house and was living in a little house by myself with a 5 year old and a 6 week old, and was just, keeping myself happy and sane and moving forward, at least in my head, by writing songs. And when I had enough songs pulled together, and was starting to do little bitty gigs here and there, like opening for somebody at Uncle Calvin's, which was a venue in Dallas. And when I was doing that, I realized that maybe I have enough songs pulled together that I like that could possibly be a record. And so I didn't know anything about that process of making a record or, how you went about it. But I knew Tom, and I knew that I felt like he would at least let me pick his brain a little bit about the process. So I started emailing him questions. And then one day he emailed me back and he said, I've got a traveling recording studio, and I'm going to be in Dallas a lot in the next year. So why don't we work together? And so that's kind of how I ended up in a working relationship with Tom Prasada Rao.
Well, Carrie, I'm gonna I just want to check in about a couple of things because having been through my own divorce process and reawakening process and Renaissance process, there's something, just a comment first, just like, so you're in this little house with two little kids, at least one of them was out of diapers by then, thank God, but like, you know, I'm curious about uh how you manage that in terms of, starting to do gigs and stuff and taking care of the kids and, making
Well,
money and all of that stuff and but also just my comment is just that, whatever it is that you had in that house, it was yours, right? And
yeah,
so whatever difficulties are, there's something really, and I just know this from my own experience. It's like whatever this is, whatever, how small it is or whatever, this is all mine, and I get to create the space that I need to, that I feel
definitely,
is best for my life and the life of my kids.
definitely. And I think I felt so empowered when I discovered songwriting that I kind of was like a bull in a china shop, just bulldozing my way through, like I'm doing this and nobody's stopping me, kind of a attitude. And so I was really lucky during that time frame to have a really close circle of women friends that I had been friends with for a number of years. In fact, they were the ones that encouraged me to pursue the songwriting. I really, really wanted to go after that very first time at the Kerrville Folk Festival. I heard people talking about the fact that there was a song school in the spring. And so I really wanted to go to that song school. And that's about the time I found out I was pregnant with Hannah, and then did the math and realized I would be like maybe 2 weeks away from giving birth if I went to that song school. And I was so depressed because I thought, I don't want to wait a whole year to go. And my friends were like, you're not waiting a year, you're going this year. If we all have to go with you, if we all have to, you know, pack all your stuff for you or watch Caroline or do all the things, we're doing it because you need to be doing this. They were that convinced that I'd kind of found my thing as much as I was.
Yeah.
And so that was I really don't think I could have gone through that process without that support. It was just huge. In addition to that, my parents lived an hour away. And so when I did start doing gigs and things like that, my parents were always really helpful and would take the girls and or come to the gigs with the girls
Wow.
and just support me that way. So I was super lucky to have that kind of support.
Oh yeah.
And then
What?
you asked something about money because I wasn't depending on music for money at that point. Says there's a weird law that you cannot get a divorce if you are pregnant. So when I discovered I was pregnant, my therapist said, listen, you know, you're going to have to wait to get this divorce, even though this is what you want to do. So my advice is to take this 9 months and just to really hone in on everything you're going to need to make this work for you. So get every duck in a row and ask for what you need, figure out who you need to ask, and just make sure that when this 9 months is over, you're ready. And so I was able to use that time to kind of negotiate a pretty decent deal with my now ex, who decided that instead of me trying to take a piece of his business, which was he was very protective of, that he would be willing to help me a little bit financially until Hannah started first grade so that I wouldn't have to go back to work. So I actually had a situation where I was able to stay at home with both of my girls while they were little. And it was having that gift that allowed me to have the space and the freedom to pursue music because I had lots of, I wasn't having to punch a time card or go to work or do daycare or do any of those things. So I had a lot more freedom than a lot of people have in that situation.
Yeah. Well, boy, what a gift. And I mean, um, he could have been a real jerk about that, but
He could have been, but he also knew that I knew he didn't want me to touch that business. And I had no desire to have any part of that. But he felt over a barrel with it. And I knew that. So I knew I could kind of use it to my advantage. And
yeah,
I did.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's
So
something that whatever his desire where it was, it just I'm glad it was to your advantage, and then he got what he wanted and it really set you up and also just probably took a lot of the stress out of the transition out of it.
completely. Yeah. It helped a lot with that for sure.
That's wonderful. And
Yeah.
also what a also gift to have the family support. That's just any kind of support and also just the support of your girlfriends as well. And I love your therapist.
Had a good one. I sure did.
Well, I mean, I
I
think
talk about it a
I'm really
lot.
blown away. It's unusual for therapists to be that direct. I mean,
And
usually,
she said that. Yeah, she actually said, I would not say this to most people. And I honestly feel like, I had gone in there week after week after week after week with the same story. It was almost like that. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. That I feel like
yeah,
that was me in her
yeah,
office to the point where she was probably like, we got to push this, out of this stuck place. And
yeah,
it took those words for me, hearing those words to get unstuck. But I'm so glad she said it because
yeah.
I probably would, I could still be in that marriage. if that hadn't
Right.
happened.
Right.
So
And the other thing too is that, you know, it sounds like, I mean, I say this to my students all the time that, my experience over the years with teaching is that people that are not only drawn to listen to music but want to be able to play music in
mhm,
any capacity are songwriters. And if you've never written a song, it's only because your faucet hasn't been opened yet. And it just
yep,
sounds to me like going to the house concert in Wiley and then, like, just sort of there was this perfect alignment of planets, which just opened your faucet, and once the
definitely.
faucet would open, it was just like, okay, now how am I going to record these songs?
Yeah. Well, another little piece of the backstory was that when I was in college, I had a roommate who ended up in Boston she's still in Boston, but she was a piano performance major. She was also a songwriter. And when I was her roommate, I was a dance major. And so we kind of categorized ourselves as the music major and the dance major. And, she didn't like venture into my world and I tried not to venture into hers, although I was fascinated with the whole songwriting thing. And so secretly, I did write a few songs back in college in a journal that I never showed her because I was way too embarrassed and intimidated by her talent. But when I decided that I was going to write songs, you know, fast forward many years, as a 37-year-old, I actually took a trip to Boston to visit her, to come out as a songwriter to her,
That's
because she was the one I wanted to know that I was doing this now. And it was the sweetest thing because she was so encouraging and took me to Club Passim and took me to the Somerville Theater to hear Bruce Coburn and just kind of showed me the road.
all right. We're back here, and Carrie's logged back in with her phone because there were some technical difficulties back there in Texas. So you were just talking about coming to Boston and coming to that's I mean, this is one of the
The
musiciest
Mecca.
play. It is a mecca of artists and a wonderful place to hear live music and Club Passim and Somerville Theater and I live like a mile and a half from the Somerville Theater. What
Crazy.
yeah. So we might have passed each other on the
We
street.
might have.
So yeah, that's so cool. And I mean, it sounds like she was just your friend was really welcoming and open and really was helping you celebrate, yourself as a songwriter. All right, we're logging back in here, and Carrie's logged back in on her phone. And so where you left off, where you were talking about coming up to Boston to see your friend, your old roommate from college, and and you know, getting to enjoy all the some live music here, and also just gets a lot of support. And and she,
Absolutely.
you
It was it was a
your roommate. She's
really
what a great musician, an amazing musician she is.
it was just a really special time. And I think that another thing that was interesting about that trip was that I it's really where I found out I was pregnant with Hannah. I had a woman at the Cambridge Food Co-op ask me if I was eating for two. And I said, "What would make you say that?" And she said, "Oh, honey, you have an aura all around you." And so I went home with this idea in my head that, oh gosh, maybe I'm pregnant. And sure enough, found out that I was. But it was really nice to have had that trip happen before, because it just really fueled the fire in me of wanting to stay on this road of being a songwriter.
Yeah, and getting
So
that it's like you had your well full that gave you the strength to do things like move out on your own with a 6 week old and a 5 year old, like,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, that's
Exactly.
cool. And then once you were back in Texas, talk about venturing into touring and playing out and stuff because you know you got two little girls and writing songs and recording, and you're talking about recording with Tom. And
Yeah, well, in the early days, I would have a very occasional gig as an opener. And then that was typically it, just because of the fact that I did have kids and didn't have the ability to go a lot of places at that point. But when I started thinking about wanting to make a CD, in fact, it was actually the Wiley House concert people. I would go to every house concert they had. At that point they were having them once or twice a month. So that was kind of like my refuge to go out there, hear these songwriters, soak up everything I could from these different people, and then play in the song circle that would happen after the concert. And that was really kind of where I started to get my chops, I guess, as an artist, and learn how to tell a story before a song, and just all those kind of things. So by the time that Tom and I started working on my project, I felt like I was ready for that. And then we worked on that project for about a year. By the end of the year, we realized that our relationship had taken a turn toward the romantic, and we were going to try being in a relationship. And then, in addition to that, we also decided to become a musical duo, which turned into the Dreamsicles.
yeah,
For me, it was a great thing because I had the the amazing gift of having this incredible artist standing next to me on a stage, excuse me, week in, week out, and all the things I learned from him just about being on a stage and how a gig works and how you sell more CDs than just a few. And I learned all the tricks of the trade from him in this process. And but the one thing I didn't do when we were touring together was play an instrument, because my feeling was his career was already, what it was. He had a well established career at that point, and I felt like the audience that came to his gigs were expecting a certain caliber of musician and performance, and I thought, I only want to do at this point what I can do that will add to that and not take away from it.
mhm,
And I was such a new guitar player that I was afraid if I was playing an instrument that I would just take away from what he could do so fabulously on his own. So I wrote songs with him and I sang, but I did not play an instrument until the economy tanked in 2007, 2008, and we decided that we needed to kind of split up the duo. We were still in the marriage at that point, but we needed to split up the duo because we realized that it was costing us too much for both of us to be flying off to gigs every weekend or every other weekend, however often we were able to do it. And we were paying for two plane tickets instead of one, when he could go and do those gigs by himself, and we'd be paying for one plane ticket. So what it started to dawn on me was that if I was still going to have a career in this business, I was going to have to really hop on it and learn to play, or at least pick the guitar back up and learn to accompany myself on my songs.
yeah,
And so that became like a mission of about a year and a half of just every day, learning these songs and practicing and doing my thing, to where I could show up at a folk alliance and play for myself. And that was a really trying time for me because,
I
I
got
had
yeah,
had a little bit of the spotlight and had my time on stage that I learned to love and feel right at home on. but I couldn't go back out there on my own unless I could go with an instrument in my hand. And so it was a huge goal and one that I'm happy that I followed through with because I was able to eventually do that. So,
That's huge, and it really just goes to show, like, I think we have sort of a cultural unspoken belief about, like, Eric Clapton just popped out of his mother's womb knowing how to shred, and
right.
but I mean, I've been teaching people music since the 80s, and I know, like, well, first of all, the only thing that has to be true in order to be able to learn how to play music is that you feel like it. And there's just no substitute for just consistent playing. And
Yeah.
even if it's just
I
short bits at,
remember
what's that?
really specifically, I remember Jonathan Bird being at our house one weekend. I think he had gigs in Dallas and he had come to stay at our house and he was asking me how it was going. And I was telling him how frustrated I was about just not being able to gig for the time being and was really trying to practice and all of that. And he told me something that really changed my whole perspective. And literally everything when it came to playing. And he said, if you'll just pick up that guitar and play 10 to 15 minutes a day, and I'm not even telling you to practice songs. He said, just pick it up and noodle. Do what you can for 15 minutes. And if you make it to 15 minutes, put it down. You've accomplished the goal for the day. He said, that's really all it's going to take you to get better. And
Absolutely.
I remember thinking about that because my time was so limited because I did have kids at home and at that point they were running around and homework and all activities they were involved in. So I didn't have a ton of time to myself, but I thought I do have 15 minutes I could dedicate to just grabbing the guitar and picking it up and seeing what I can accomplish today. And
Yeah.
that's how I did it. I was able in a year and a half of 15 minutes a day to put myself back on a stage. And the other thing is that what I learned in that 15 minutes is when the 15 minutes was over, usually I didn't want to put it down. I was like, oh, I could do this song or I could practice that one or, and it just kind of snowballed into more. And it's a good rule of thumb. That's when I would always tell my students when I was teaching ukulele and guitar to beginner students, I would tell them the same thing because I thought it really worked for me. And the thought of you've got to sit down for an hour and practice,
Yeah.
that is not all that appetizing to anyone.
Well,
So
no,
I
and
like the 15-minute rule.
yeah, I'm a strong believer, and I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I call it my favorite practice routine for us over functioning, over scheduled New Englanders. Otherwise, it's me, and my thing is, and this is at any level, is, you know, 5 days a week, 10 minutes, scale, song, done, and
Yep.
treat that time like a date, a 10-minute date with your most favorite person on the planet. And people are, my students are surprised in a nice way of how much it makes of a difference. And you know what? I practice, if I'm doing creative work, you know, well, practice, sometimes, hours can go by, especially if I'm writing a song or something like that, hours can pass and I won't
Right.
notice. But when it comes to the more, sort of more tedious stuff, it's like I do
Hmm.
that 10-15 minutes at a time, 'cause I have the attention span of a flea, so it makes a
It
huge
comes in handy in other areas. Yeah. Like laundry for me, that's like I'll do it for 15 minutes and then I'll let myself go do something fun for a little bit and then I'll come back and finish if I haven't finished. But most of the time I'm done in that time. So it's a good rule for lots of things.
yeah, that good point. Really good point. You know, so my other question, speaking of, you have kids running around the house and stuff. So how did you manage that with, I mean, well, it sounds like you're still in Texas where you had the nice support network. So was that continued to be the case while you were both going on the road with Tom and then also doing some stuff on your own?
Yeah, when I started to do things on my own, we really had like a tag team parenting thing worked out where we try to book the gigs for Tom on the weekends when I had the girls at home. And then on the weekends when they were with their biological dad, that's when I could go on the road. So back when we were touring together, we typically would use those 2 weekends a month that they would be at their dad's house to book gigs other places.
Yeah.
But we were never really more than like weekend warriors because we tried to be at home during the week, and then like we'd drop the girls off at school on a Friday morning, go hop on a plane, fly to a gig, have a gig Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night sometimes, and then we'd hop on another plane and fly back home so we could be parents during the week.
Yeah.
And it worked for the most part pretty well for us. I think that there were, times here and there, like especially with my youngest Hannah, when she was maybe like 3 and 4, when she'd be at her dad's house and really missing me or missing Tom or both of us. And I'd get that phone call on the road that was really hard to get right before a gig when she's trying to go to sleep and really wants me to be there with her to put her to bed. And I'm like, well, honey, I can't right now. And we had a little song that we would sing that was like our special song. So we do that over the phone. And then I'd have to very quickly compartmentalize that part of my life to be able to go back to being a performer. So I feel like that's a skill that's really important to have if you're a somebody that kind of comes into the music business like I did a little bit backwards, had my kids first and then discovered what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Yeah.
So you have to really be able to compartmentalize life because when you're home, you need to be at home. You need to be present with your kids and doing life at home. And then when you're on the road, you've got to kind of be able to put that aside so that you can focus on the task at hand. And
That's
not, I don't think everybody can do that. I think that's a hard one, but it's one that I feel like by the end of my time touring, I had mastered it pretty well.
well, I think what's really important here and I think really helpful is it's like I think I've been focusing on in talking to you about like how do you deal with the logistics, and which weekend and that
Mm,
kind of stuff. And that's really important. But then there's this whole other emotional spiritual part of like, you're out on
mm,
the road and your kids are with their biological dad and they miss, one of them misses you and whatever. And like, there's so many
mhm,
things and just that, I mean, this is that spiritual piece. I mean, all the gurus say this, that our point of greatest power is in the present, and being in the
mm,
present. That's how we can be the most loving to the people in our lives, that when we're with them, I'm here with you
yeah,
right now. And so, I mean, that's a whole piece, where I mean, you're talking about compartmentalizing, but I feel like that's probably one of a number of emotional, spiritual strategies that people can use. But really, it's like a mantra, when you're meditating, where, you know, to do my terrible imitation of Deepak Chopra, gently bring your attention back to the mantra. Um, and but that's what you're doing, really. It's like, okay, I've had this
yeah,
really intense emotional conversation with my daughter, and now I have to go on stage and be completely present. So the mantra is, I'm on stage, I'm here to take care of and love the people in the audience here,
hmm,
and then, okay, now I'm here at home,
yeah,
and, and I need to help, Hannah with her math homework, and oh, and it's time to cook dinner, and or whatever else. But then you're present in that, and that's really just,
right.
you know, and whatever feelings you're having,
And
it's,
I do have to say,
yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. I was just going to say that I don't know that I could have done any of that on the level that I was able and fortunate enough to be able to do it without a partner at that point in life. It
Mhm.
was so, Tom was such an incredible person for jumping into this family life, that he didn't start out, as their dad, but by the end of his time with us, both girls really thought of him as a true father figure.
Yeah,
And it was so nice to have the support when like one of us would come home and just desperately needed a nap, and the other one would say, okay, well, I'll go pick the girls up from school, you take a nap. And then we kind of tag teamed a lot of our parenting, which I was so appreciative to have him for.
absolutely.
And then it was also why I did not continue touring when we split up and Hannah and I moved to Asheville, because I did move away from that support system to a great degree, and realized that I couldn't leave her, and she was a 14-year-old at the time,
Right.
and I needed to be something a little more stable than being gone a lot. So that's when I started teaching in a school. So, that was a sacrifice that at that point in time I felt, you know, it was my sacrifice to make, and one that I did not feel bad about making. I knew that, she was at a critical point in her growing up, and I really wanted to be focused on her and there for it. So,
Yeah, well, it meant that you were present in a really solid way for her high school years, you know,
yeah, for
and
sure.
also, and not just high school years, but like a brand new city. It was the first time she'd ever lived outside of town.
Exactly. It was a lot of change for both of us, and we needed to be around each other as much as possible to kind of make it through it.
Yeah,
So touring at that point, was taken off the table, and gladly so. I also was, grieving the end of a relationship, and just needed some time and space to do that out of the public eye a little bit.
absolutely.
So it was good timing for trying some new things.
Absolutely. And I think I remember at the time when you moved to Asheville, I remember you saying that it that you had always had this feeling that Asheville was like where you were supposed to be, and you had felt that for a long time. And and so it was one of the silver linings of a tremendous loss was, oh, I get to go where I know I'm supposed to be. And I think
Absolutely.
there's sort of it seems to me like when you moved back to Asheville from Nashville, I was like, there was a part of me that I was just like, good for her and duh. I mean, Nashville is a wonderful place,
Yeah.
but there's something about like your path, your heart wants to be in Asheville, you know.
There's something really special about that place, and I've met so many people in my time there that have said the very specific words. I came to Asheville to heal, and there's something healing about that city. Right now, it needs a little healing itself, but that was just what I really recognized early on in being there, that it was a place that people sought out for just the kind of thing that I was doing there.
Yeah,
So
absolutely, absolutely. And so now, I mean, I think you've got your lovely tiny house set up in Asheville, and I know you're hanging in Texas for a little while Asheville recovers and you figure out what's the next step with Asheville a mess. And um, I have a couple of friends who like their entire house was washed away. Two of my
yeah, I know one of those friends at least.
Yes,
Yeah,
right, you do know one of them, and so but I've also been not surprised at all, but also just blown away by, what Mr. Rogers always used to talk about, like look for the helpers in the
yeah.
midst of crisis, and just, people.
They have risen from the ashes. I mean, there are so many people. It's really it's hard not being there right now, but it's also I'm thankful not to be there. I was actually on my way to Texas unrelated when the storm hit. So I was not there at all for any of it.
Yeah.
But there was something really traumatic about being away from it and wondering, is my house going to be okay? Is my
My God.
cat
Yeah.
in my house okay? And are my friends okay? Just all the things that you had no control over being so far away.
Yeah.
Um,
The actual, the physical experience is different.
mhm,
The trauma is it's just a different type of trauma, and
definitely.
trauma all the same. And I mean, I think my biggest concern, for you and everybody in the area who dealt with it on whatever level is like just hope that you're just surrounding yourself with love and support to get to the other side of whatever it
Yeah.
is you do that with.
That's kind of why I came back to Texas. And I just felt like I have this time off from work right now and just need, I think, a little space to breathe and get through this crazy event we've all kind of been through together and, figure out what my next steps are going to be. I don't know that I'll return to Asheville, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'll have to go pick up my house at some point,
Yeah.
but I was leaning toward maybe doing something different before all this hit. And when it hit, it almost felt to me like a bit of a sign that maybe this is time for you to do something different. I
Yeah.
don't know for sure yet. I'll make that decision, but I'm definitely just taking some time to figure out what's next on the agenda for me.
Well, that's very cool. And also I love that, you've created this infrastructure for yourself with your tiny house. It is a mobile house, and wherever it is that whether you stay there or it does give you this flexibility, even if you don't tour with the tiny
Mhm.
house, you have this flexibility and this place that, anyway, I'm very happy for you that you have that.
Me
Aside
too.
I mean, huge, of course, that it survived the floods, but also then bigger than that, that like it's giving you the kind of freedom that you hoped it would. It's just, the detail,
Exactly. I mean, I
the
haven't
detail.
moved it many times yet, but my goal was always, have house will travel kind of
Mhm.
situation where if there's some place on the map that just really speaks to me, I want to be able to have the freedom to try it. And having this tiny house on wheels gives me that freedom. So
Yeah,
very thankful for that.
yeah, that's wonderful. Well, Carrie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. And there's so many jewels in this conversation that anyway, very, very grateful. And also just really
Well, thank
excited
you for
about,
asking.
oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. And as I send out stuff to a list of artists who teach music each week. And, my goal always is like, what kind of info and insights can I share to take care of the people that are on my list? So, having you come today and hearing what you have to say, I know that's going to be really helpful for a whole lot of people.
Well,
And
thank you. I hope so.
yeah, and I'm just so excited about you're talking about this. It sounds like it's like the Real Songs, Real People program that you're launching next year. It's like a online festival almost.
It is a little bit like that. It's definitely a place where you can go every single day of the week and hear something is going to be brand new, freshly written song by an artist that you may or may not have heard of. And to me, that's part of the fun. Sometimes it's by artists that you know and love already, but it's a great way to discover new artists every day. Like I have 4 or 5 I say kids, they're not kids anymore, they're in their 20s, but kids that I taught at Interlochen, that are participating in this test group, and they're fabulous songwriters, but none of my friends would have ever heard of them. So it's a
Right.
great place to discover new artists. It's also a great place to write a bunch of songs. So if there's anybody out there that's interested in participating, they can go to carriecooper.com and look for the Real People, Real Songs Challenge, and all the information is right there.
Cool. Well, I'll include when I share this interview, I'll definitely include your contact info, the website info, and when you're getting ready to do the launch, let me know, and I'll help you get the word out.
Thank you. That would be great.
All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, Carrie. And
Oh, you too, Janet. It was so nice to talk to you. I'm sorry we got cut off a few times.
yeah, no worries, no worries. That's why editing is good. All
Thank God for editing. That's right.